Welcome to College Connection. My name is May Hanna, and I'm your host, and I'd like to introduce you to two special guests who are here to talk about their study abroad trip to Mexico. Jeff Rubel, our professor of legal studies, and Tiffany Yostin, paralegal student at UC Claremont College. Welcome. You folks took a trip for spring break to Mexico, and so you're here to talk about that experience, much like Jay Page and his student came. It's really exciting because I know you've done this in the past, but have you done it during spring break?
No, this is the first time we've done it in spring break, which offered a kind of a unique opportunity to the students. Before we've always done it in the summer.
That's what I thought. So tell us about the trip, Jeff, and tell us how many students you took, and how did it differ between taking the students during spring versus summer?
Well, on this trip there were 12 total students, and it's as you noted, it's the first time we've done it on spring break. So it was a little different. We left the day before classes were out and returned 11 o'clock at night on a Sunday before the classes started.
Yay.
So everybody was wide awake and bright-eyed to start school back. But it really did provide a unique opportunity for the students to take a spring break without spending their time consuming alcohol and running around on a beach. So, the trip itself, we left on Friday and flew into a city called Villahermosa, Mexico, and then took a transport into Chiapas. It is an area that is to the extreme south of Mexico. It's an area that is heavy in coffee and agriculture. But the first stop we went to was Palenque, which is one of their premier Mayan ruin sites. And we stayed there for 2 nights and actually had an archaeologist that led us on a tour through the entire ruins. Very, very famous archaeologist, actually had been in charge of part of the dig in Palenque. So I think it was a very unique experience for the students to get that perspective.
And so for those who are watching and they're thinking paralegal studies, how does that correlate to a trip to Mexico? Connect the dots there for us.
So in about 2008, the University of Cincinnati decided that study abroad needed to be a key component for all students. At that time on our campus, we had almost no opportunities for students on the regional campus to do study abroad. So I began to develop a program that would introduce the students to a different culture and also introduce them to a different legal system. So the first trip we took down, we met with lawyers and did a broad array of things that just focused on culture and legal issues. On this trip, what I really wanted the paralegal students to experience was that whole notion that in the United States we kind of live in a cocoon, and we mirror our culture, our legal system, the way we do things onto everyone else. And the reality is that as you go to different countries, as you do a study abroad, you learn that there are very different cultures, different approaches, and I think it makes a very much more rounded student. So connecting the dots, I think future paralegals are leaders. They're people that go to work in law firms where they're communicating with people from diverse backgrounds. And a trip like this, I think, really lets them experience and begin to understand some of the cultural bridges that we close off.
That's fantastic. So Tiffany, what were your impressions of Mexico, and why was this something that you found desirable and thinking, well, I think I want to do that?
I've traveled most of my life. I've lived in different countries, and so this year my son's actually studying abroad in Spain.
Oh,
I thought, well,
wow.
Mom's back in college, the non-traditional student. I want to take the opportunity and do the same. I've never been to Mexico, and we were, speaking about the Mayan ruins. You can't recreate the experience that we had if you did the trip on your own. We would have maybe gone to the Maya ruins, but then I would have never been in the home of the archaeologist and saw the book that his family put together, that they took notes deciphering the Mayan language.
Wow.
We met with a scientist who talked about the mice and the corn and the hybrids and the hill you know, the Indians and how they grow the corn. These things you wouldn't do if you were a tourist. So, and as far as diversity, it does provide you with the skills to work, I would say, in a more diverse environment and gives you more of a global understanding. And nowadays, most corporations, and for paralegals and attorneys and firms, you can pretty much will bet there's going to be some international connection. So be it that they have a facility overseas, that they have maybe an employee or even clients. So it's a skill that's looked for in a paralegal, and we were given the opportunity to experience it.
That's fantastic. That's a interesting way to describe, you know, your experience and how it would correlate into the work experience. Of course, you probably, as a non-traditional student, have a different perspective than some of the students who might be younger. Did you have a good mix of students, Jeff?
We really did. This trip, in fact, was the most unique in terms of the diversity of the students. We had students that were 19 years old, and we had students that were in their 50s. We had students that had never been out of Ohio, and we had students like Tiffany that had actually traveled a little bit. I think that diversity within the group made this by far the most interesting group I've taken, because you know, you take 12 people and you put them together 24/7 for 11 straight days.
Sometimes in cramped buses, going through the mountains, and yeah, it was.
But it was a very interesting group because of that as well. You know, for me, the biggest pro for study abroad for anyone is that you really get to put a different cultural lens on. And I think that opportunity to see another culture firsthand really is transformative for most students. I cannot do that in a classroom. I can talk to you all day about different cultures, different people, but I cannot bring you to the reality of it unless you see it firsthand. And you know, I want to read what one of my students wrote after the trip. And I would say the most common comment I get after the trip is, it's changed my whole perspective. It's changed my whole college experience. And this student that just went on this trip wrote, this was literally the best experience I've had since I got to college. We've been back for a few weeks and I still think about it every day, and it pops into my dreams all the time. I learned more about myself on this trip than I have during my experiences back home. The homestay experience was phenomenal. I am still in contact with my family through Facebook, and I miss them greatly. Most of the students before we left, when I told them they would be living for 6 days, 7 days really, with a middle-class Mexican family, that was, I think, the most stressful part.
Considering the majority of the families do not have
English
skills, and there was a large group of us that also did not have the Spanish skills. So, you know, you're figuring out, okay, if we're living with these people for 7 days, how we are going to communicate our needs and also communicate, you know, how grateful we are for them for opening their homes to us.
Sure.
You didn't need the language. The language barrier was completely broken on the first day. There's apps on phones that you can use by putting in the word and it would speak it out for you. But my host family had their grandchildren come over and I helped them with their English lessons. They put on Disney movies in Spanish and told me I was learning Spanish that way. And on the last day, they said to myself and the woman that was staying with us as well that we're in their heart and we're now part of their family. It really, and again, you could not as a tourist have experienced the true culture and made a connection with the people of that country unless we did the host families.
That's fantastic. So when the students were apprehensive about that, you probably tried to share this, it'll be okay, but I guess until you get there, you don't really know.
Well, in fact, I won't read another student comment, but another student wrote, this was way out of my comfort zone.
I bet.
And I was crazy nervous before the trip. I never dreamed it would be that kind of experience, but the most stressful thing is the homestay. And, you know, we are together for the first 3 days, and we stay in a hotel. And then all of a sudden, in this case, we got to San Cristobal, Chiapas. And suddenly the students go off to their homestays.
We depart. We don't, we're going home with someone who doesn't speak our language. We do not speak their language. We're following them down the sidewalk with our suitcases, going through this maze of buildings thinking, oh my gosh, are we going to find our way back? How are we going to ask for things? So I think with the diversity of the students that went with the age group, we really helped one another with that.
Yeah, consistently, the students have said in all 4 trips I've taken, the highlight was the homestay. And I told them, we meet 3 times before we go, and I told them that. But again, you have to experience that to really appreciate it. And so this trip, most of the students had really nice families. I'm amazed at how many of them have said to me, oh, I'm emailing my family, I'm in contact with my family. And that's something, that bonding, that experience is something that you can't teach in a classroom.
Right, of course.
And so, one of the other things we did when we were on the trip was we had a Mexican attorney come in and talk to the group. Mexico's going through right now some of the things we went through in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and even up to right today with women's rights. And how do they deal with domestic abuse and women that are disempowered? And so we had this terrific talk about their experience and what they're doing. And I think most of the students left that just saying, wow, things are not that different when you cross borders.
That's fantastic. So Jeff, the students did receive college credit for going on the week-long trip.
It's a 3-credit class
Okay.
that they can apply in multiple programs or in the paralegal program itself. And this particular trip, we had 4 people that were not paralegal students that went on the trip. One of them, 3 of them were actually business students in the downtown campus. But one of them was a Spanish major. Part of what they do during the trip is take Spanish lessons every day for a few hours.
Which is really enjoyable. It's an international school. It is run by a woman from Germany who's lived there for many years. And while we were there were other nationalities and people from all walks of life taking classes. And what we did was at the beginning of the day, we would all show up and congregate at school, divide up into our levels, and we would have 2 different lessons, and then from there we go into town and do a practicum and try out what we learned for the morning.
So
That's
another
fantastic.
opportunity for cultural lenses. I mean, we went into a school where you had people from all across Europe coming there to take classes, Canada, and the students only paradigm is what we do here. They go to a classroom with 30 people, all Americans, all struggling with the exact same issues. Here, they were in classes of anywhere from about 2 to 6 people, experiencing and seeing other students from across the world. And so that's really what this trip is all about.
Speaking for myself personally, but the students that were in my class, we end up connecting very well with their instructors and have exchanged emails and photos and
Wonderful.
Yeah, you make long-lasting friendships.
Jeff and Tiffany, thank you so much for coming in today and sharing your experiences about your trip abroad to Mexico. It sounds like it was a wonderful experience and I think a great opportunity for students at UC Claremont College. And thank you for joining us.